This is the Only in Louisiana podcast with Michelle Southern.
Well, it has been an incredible year for learning about all things podcasting. And here on the episode where I review my first year, I'm also excited that one of the big goals I was building up to was securing the domain for onlyinlouisiana.com, which I have as of this week. So I'm super excited about that. If you would like to see our new episodes, onlyinlouisiana.com is up and running. And without question, one of the favorite things I've ever done in my career is cover stories about Louisiana, a state that is so unique and one that I love so much. So to close out 2021, I wanted to highlight some of my favorite episodes from the year, and starting with chicken boxing. You know, this one was so fun to me to chat with JP Morrell and Elbert Guillory to get their recollections of the famous chicken boxing bill in the legislature. And this was episode 1.
It was like he had sprouted a second head. When I was looking at him, my brain stopped processing for a second.
But I want to salute Guillory for trying to keep big government out of our chicken sporting events. Because where does it end? First, it's cockfighting. Now, chicken boxing. Am I going to have to close my chicken dojo? You tell me, Louisiana Senate, what manner of chicken combat shall your law allow?
They have their own individual homes. They are treated extremely well. They have the best health care, the best nutrition, the best food. If I were a chicken, I would want to be a fighting chicken and not a Walmart chicken.
Then there was the story of the famous New Orleans boutique Flirty Girl, one that any aspiring entrepreneur would be inspired by. Lauren Haydell just came up with this great idea as a single mom of 3, working in Baton Rouge, living in New Orleans, running this T-shirt store in 2009, a year the Saints were doing really well. And her most popular shirt was the hashtag WhoDat, an alleged federal trademark violation.
The night before, I had gotten a cease and desist letter from the NFL over our hashtag WhoDat shirt. So I'm like, oh gosh, let me run to the restroom real quick and answer this tweet. I hit send, and I did not go back and check it, but it just exploded. I just explained in those whatever many characters on Twitter the situation, just trying to appease this customer. And within minutes, Twitter's blowing up. News stations are calling the front desk at the Farm Bureau trying to access me. Well, the next morning I wake up and I'm on the front page of the paper. I've got ESPN, Good Morning America trying to contact me for national interviews. And it's at a time where the Saints are heading to the Super Bowl, and all of those local stories matter at that time. You know, they're paying attention. And for the media, this was a total David and Goliath story of a single mom working a full-time job, trying to sell WhoDat shirts in the back of her house, essentially. You know, they were all over it. And the media outlets picked up on it. People were pissed. They were livid just that the NFL could do something like this. So what happened was Saints are heading to the Super Bowl, and Saints fans want a Flirty Girl T-shirt. They don't want an NFL T-shirt. We couldn't print them fast enough. The lines wrapped around the block.
Like many Louisianians, I am enraptured by the story of Governor Edwin Edwards. Served 4 terms here, was convicted and sent to jail for corruption, which many believe was a witch hunt. As a news reporter, I befriended his wife, Trina, while the governor was in prison, and that's when they met. So for the purpose of the Only in Louisiana angle, this was perfect. And I wanted to hear from Trina how she fell in love with Governor Edwards despite their 51-year age difference.
I had a friend who was a guard over there just mention it to him that his friend had written him a letter, and he went back and looked for it, and then he wrote me a second letter, and we started talking back and forth, and we wrote for probably, I guess, a couple of months, and then he asked me to come visit, and so I did, and when I went, he was absolutely nothing like I expected. I made the joke about saying I was going to marry him, but I really did not have that in my brain at all.
Right.
And when he walked in, I was kind of expecting like this, I don't know, I expected him to be like I would be if I had just spent 8 years in prison, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
He came in, he was like larger than life. He was talking to everybody. He spoke to everybody before he spoke to me, which kind of was like, wait a second. And then after that, he asked me to come back. I spent I think 8 hours there the first day. And then he asked me if I wanted to come back. And I was like, yeah, I will. So he said, well, what about tomorrow? So I said, okay. And after that, I was there every visiting day that was allowed.
Congressman Clay Higgins is certainly one of the more colorful characters in our state, who rose to fame when he was with the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office for the Crime Stopper videos that many called controversial. He ended up losing his job over it, or resigning, I should say. Some folks called those videos, though, dead on.
A criminal can get on such a crime spree and wreak so much havoc that if hard-working, law-abiding folks find out who he is, he's lucky not to end up crawfish bait. Now, it's time to arrest this menace to society.
I never forget the cameraman when we were done. He said, "That was awesome."
Yeah.
That was the first one, and that just kind of launched it. It became very successful. The program was very successful. Crime Stoppers used to be, nobody watched it. And it became very, popular. So what happened was we ran the Gremlins video. We produced it. We edited it. We ran it. And it broke the internet. By Friday, our phones and emails were melting with national press. Everybody wanted to talk. I said during my resignation speech that I was going to step away from the world for a period of time. My wife and I were going to go off the grid so that we were going to go into prayerful reflection. And it was during that time that I received thousands of messages from across the country and the world, by the way, of support and encouragement to seek federal office. So we followed that formula and we won. I knew we would win from the beginning if you look at all my speeches.
The man who lied about everything. If there was an episode I would encourage you to go listen to in its entirety, because it's hard to really capture the full story of what happened here without hearing the full story. But this is about a man who came to the United States in Louisiana from the UK and tricked everyone into believing that he was this great guy when really he was the worst kind of manipulative predator that there was. So for this clip, I used some prior interviews from Jim Inkster. He did those with the victims, which is what you'll hear first here. And then the entirety of the podcast episode, ultimately starting with and culminating with the author of the book about catching Scott Rogers in his lies, Ronna Gray.
Now I've spoken to a federal agent in the US and I've told my story because I didn't want this. I couldn't see it happening again. When I knew it was happening again, I had to come forward and make a stand.
I would put that interview up against any interview on national television in the country, and how it was handled and how professional he was. And I'll always be appreciative of that, because at this point, as you can imagine, I had become very protective of these young survivors of abuse. And every time something came up, I sort of advocated for them, saying, wait a minute, look what they've been through. Let's make sure they have protection here. And I'm glad you got to sit there and experience it as it was happening, because it was powerful.
2021 was also a year that saw extremely powerful testimony from one of the most famous Louisiana girls that there is, in Britney Spears, a girl from Kentwood, hailing from Tangipahoa Parish. Now, we know that she was released from her conservatorship later this year, but before that, for this episode, we got some local legal opinions about her fight. And one of the most prominent defense attorneys in our area, Jill Craft, offered an excellent perspective about a fellow Louisiana girl.
What is difficult for me to understand is, even though she's been subjected to a conservatorship, she still has rights of due process. And really, interdictions here and curatorships here, and I would submit to you likely conservatorships in California, are always subject to reform and always subject to change, because the law doesn't presuppose somebody is irretrievably beyond any kind of reclamation or restoration. You know, we We believe in second chances. And so I suspect that in her circumstance, if she is capable of demonstrating, look, that was then and this is now, then, I would suggest to you it's going to be revoked. Because you can't indefinitely keep somebody subject to a conservatorship without proof that they are still, quote, a danger to themselves and others, or they are incapable consistently to take care of their own affairs. I mean, those types of decisions. These legal procedures are not designed for people who make poor choices or go through rough patches. They're designed for people who literally are permanently incapable of taking care of themselves. That's why in each circumstance there's always an out. You can always go back to the court and petition for it to be either modified or vacated.
Edwin Edwards passed away on July 12th of this year. His biographer and I, Leo Honeycutt, spoke on this incredible man's life.
I believe that Edwin Edwards will be remembered as a guy who got things done, but more than that, he was truly a guy who cared. He is always going to be mullied by the conviction, the jail time. He knows. He and I had those discussions. That it really was like Julius Caesar said, that, the good things a man does are forgotten on the spot, but everything bad he ever did will be buried with his bones. And that's true. And I think in Edward's case, he knows that was going to wind up being his epitaph. He was a great guy, and that will always be put in every kind of writing that's ever about him. But one thing he did tell me that I'll always remember is we were doing these interviews in prison, and one day I showed up and he had a very pensive look on his face, because he was usually very pragmatic about everything. And I said, "What's up with you?" And he said, "I've discovered, and I need to tell you this, that if you want to live a long life that has any chance of being happy, never hold a grudge."
Congresswoman Julia Lutlow won her seat for federal office in Louisiana after her husband, Luke Lutlow, won it and then tragically died from COVID. I wanted to share Julia's story in the midst of what was an extremely hectic and tragic for many pandemic year.
Of course, I think the world of Luke, but, after I made the announcement that I was going to run for the seat, I started calling all the contacts in his phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Michelle, there's plenty that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And every person had a story, and every person claimed that they were his best friend.
Yeah.
And that they go back 20 years. And I'm like, okay, if absolutely. And so quite the legacy he's left, huge shoes to fill, but what an honor to carry on the torch. And he taught me that the only thing that matters is people and relationships and how you make people feel. That's how they remember you. And I think he made a lot of people feel really great about themselves. And I'm happy to continue on his good work.
Hurricane Ida made landfall August 29, 2021. And while the national cameras go away, the destruction in our Louisiana parishes, and even to this day, as we review the year, is still very much ongoing. And as always, we appreciate you sharing and helping us spread the word that help is still very much needed in our state for the October 29th episode of The Forgotten Towns of Hurricane Ida. Later on, I had to go back to Trina, who once again found herself in the news even months after the death of her husband, because she was dealing with some drama. That is an ongoing situation, but I wanted to give her the opportunity also to tell her side of the story. For the episode, Trina's side of the story.
And I knew it was going to be temporary, so I just said, just pick a place and put him there. Well, after I did that, I was so miserable and unhappy with it. I would go out to the cemetery and I could not make myself walk out to the grave. I struggled with it every single day. And then I just felt this strong desire to have him brought home. eventually I plan to put him somewhere permanently. There, I know you saw in the paper probably that they are working on putting a cemetery for former governors.
Yes.
At the Capitol.
Yes.
Which is what the plan always was to eventually try to have him move there. But I just couldn't stand it. So I wanted to bring him home until it was time for that.
The bonfires on the levee, lighting the way for Papa Noel along the Mississippi River levee in Louisiana, a time-honored tradition, and one that we heard from a guy who's been building bonfires since he was able to walk, in Josh Weidert of Blood, Sweat, and Bonfires.
Gabriel's Bonfires, our availability is shrunk down a lot. There's only 2 spots left to build in Gabriel's, ours and another guy who's down the road from us. And the reason for that being is they came through with a bike path on top of the levee. A few, years back, whenever we heard that this bike path was coming, me and my friends went over to a meeting and we started trying to fight to get this thing moved down the levee to preserve the top of the levee for us to keep building bonfires.
Yeah.
This kind of also helped with us stepping up our game with these bonfires. I think at that point in time was like whenever we started making them animated and, making them more elaborate, it was like, all right, we need to bring attention to this.
Yeah.
Because if not, it's going to go away because they're going to build this bike path over it. So, what happened was we kept fighting we kept building these bonfires that were, attention getters and bringing people from all over the world and making, big news and stuff. It's like, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and move it down the levee so I can continue to build. So that was a battle. I mean, we can kind of say we won and we compromised with the parish because they kind of get their bike path. We keep our bonfires. Everybody's happy.
A great year, and one where I'm getting to the point where every single day there are more people who download each episode. So we do have plans to grow in 2022, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Thank you for tuning in and for listening to all things that make our state so great and unique. And hopefully the passion that you hear from me is coming through this microphone, because Louisiana is certainly something that I am very passionate about, to say the very least. And again, online at onlyinlouisiana.com, or just search for Only in Louisiana however you listen to podcasts.
Because only in Louisiana.